June 4th, 1989, the gunshot orchestra washes in through television sets. Waves of nameless bodies find their way into the eyes of faraway family. A mother falls to her knees at the sight of her children picked clean like debris from the crimson streets. This is her heartbeat. This is my country. This is the soil of a garden where 1 billion people planted their family trees. This is the past of me. I stand here in this ruin of a square with the ghosts of 1,000 bodies, our hearts still flickering, but not yet dead. In 1989, the government painted the Beijing streets red, a soft river of scholars' blood and a deafening crescendo of 10,000 simultaneous tank and gunshot wounds, an instant of fire, and a generation of protesting college students take their final breath. Later that year, my Chinese father takes his first breath in a university overseas. He attends it for free with a scholarship paid with the currency of international sympathy. In the American first grade, another student points a water gun at my chest. Shot dead, the bane fades away in seconds, but the sound enters my bloodstream, tunnels down the roots of my family tree, and lands on the bloody portrait that the government's army painted on their own streets. But this painting is a portrait of me, a portrait of 100,000 injured, 200 dead, 5,000 dead, no one really knows. A portrait of Chinese ancestry spilled onto the canvas of our mother country. We were 20 years old when it happened. We placed the Statue of Liberty at the center of our country's heart. For 5 days, she stood up, overlooking a sea of 100,000 men and women united as one, and then a tank's first flame sears the torch from her hands, and her body is reduced to rubble at our feet. But still, we marched onwards. With starving stomachs and hearts aflame, we held each other's hands so tight that even as the students next to us were bayoneted to the ground, we kept marching on until our voices carved a canyon onto the other side of the world. And they can try 1,000 times with their loaded guns and rushing tanks to chop the stems off our country's memory, to erase the names of the dead from the pages of history. But they can never beat the love out of us. Let our voices resurface above the steam of our country's body as she struggles to tie every broken piece of herself back together, the same way that I am trying to tie the pieces of my past into one. Look at that gun. When it fired, 100,000 protesters' hearts liquefied into an oil to burn a torch as bright as the sun. Look at the land. The government has set our country on fire. Look at the sky. It is the only home that we have left. Become bird, become migrant constellation, become lit up forever in an onrush of red. So my name is Jess X Chen, and I'm a queer Chinese poet, activist, and filmmaker. The poem that I just shared with you is part of my own migration story. When I was growing up in the US in middle school, I was one of the only women of color, and as a result, I was afraid to speak. The other students around me, they would call me Stephen the Stuttering Stump, and they would finish my sentences for me. It was only through poetry and performing it and cultivating a community amongst many other migrant people of color that I was able to cultivate my voice and find the courage to stand here today. My migration story begins in the gunfire of the Tiananmen Square massacre of 1989. My parents risked everything to come to the US in the hope that they could find a new life with opportunities without the fear of death or prosecution or censorship. When they came to America, they faced racism as they learned to command the English language, and they resisted assimilation by holding on to whatever strands of Chinese community that they could find, whether that was staging folk concerts in Chinese restaurants or organizing fashion shows at the local library. I want to tell you about how much it hurts to be hundreds of thousands of miles away from our homelands, to be able to speak my native tongue enough to ask for directions, but not enough to articulate love to my aunts and uncles and grandparents who are an ocean away. So every day, the survival of trauma's separation becomes an act of imagination. This is my parents' legacy, but this is also the legacy of Black and brown and undocumented families who champion so much more difficult struggles than mine every day. They are my heroes. America was once without borders. These lands belong to no one but the sea and the earth and the sky, and they bore witness to hundreds of indigenous tribes. I learned from the Navajo people to see the earth as a family member and a friend, rather than a resource to be divided and owned. But the legacy of colonization since 1492 sustains its own power by drawing borders between the US and Mexico, between straight and queer, culture and nature, logic and the imagination, whiteness and color, and between us and them. Borders and immigration laws and detention centers are all part of the tools of a world where dreaming has been made illegal, where blackness and brownness has been made illegal, where whether or not you can live legally at home is determined by the possession of a piece of paper and how closely you resemble the class, sexuality, and color of straight white Americans. But when these borders are not drawn with the complex and diverse needs of the human spirit in mind, we must cross them. So how can we empower migrants to tell their own stories in a way that truly reflects the bravery and the resilience and the love it takes for them to transcend borders and survive in the US? One example can be found in the letters written by Central American mothers and children who were detained at the Karnes County Detention Center on the US-Mexico border. My brilliant friends who work for an organization called Culture Strike that uses arts activism to rise up for migrant justice started an incredible project called Visions from the Inside. In this project, they pair up an artist of color with a letter written by a mother or a child in the detention center. In the letter behind me, a Honduran mother writes about how her attempt to bring her younger son with her across the US-Mexico border resulted in her detention. She fled rape and abuse and poverty in her home country only to experience it again in the detention center. Essentially, she is detained for her dreaming, if only to be reunited with her family. So in response to this letter, I created this painting called I Will Never Stop Reaching for You. Despite the grief and the trauma that this mother faces daily at the detention center, she becomes a constellation that stretches across the night sky, forever reaching for her older son and the rest of her family across the border. This painting is a testament to this mother's resilience and also the resilience of all undocumented families who strive every day to transcend borders with their love. Another example is this mural that I collaborate on with several artists that honors the work done by Colibri Center for the Human Rights. Colibri, which is Spanish for hummingbird, is an indigenous symbol for safe passing between life and death. In this mural, a mother is holding a photo of her missing daughter, and this mother is one of the cases that Colibri Center worked on. By bearing witness to the incredible stories and the real-life reasons for survival that drive these people to cross borders, Colibri's work shows us that the lives of Black and brown migrants are human lives worth fighting for. Together, these murals and these letters and paintings create a mythology of migrant resistance. However, I want to acknowledge that this mythology of resistance is not only in the journey, in the physical journey across borders that these migrants take, but also in the mental journey of daily self-care that it takes to survive in the US. This is my friend Wo Chan. I think Wo is a warrior. Wo is a queer, undocumented Chinese poet, activist, and drag performer. Wo inspires me every day, not only in the incredible poetry that they write about queerness and migration, but also in the fun and the life that they recognize as important every day. I will always associate my time here in New York with the times that Wo lit up a karaoke room with their incredible voice and sings opera and wears clown masks and leotards. It took me a while to realize that all of these things are part of Wo's way to sustain and take care of their heart in a country that is actively trying to deport them. 300 million migrants live in the US. Behind me are just a few of the incredible friends and family that inspire me and give me the courage to stand here today. Even as we are made invisible by a heteronormative, white supremacist, and xenophobic culture, we refuse to be silent. We are radical activists dedicating our lives to creating a freer world for future generations. We carry the trauma of a flawed immigration system within our bodies. When this nation illegalizes our boundless imagination, our migration, and the survival that follows, then becomes an act of creative resistance. Audre Lorde, a queer Black poet of the Caribbean American diaspora, once said, "The master's tools cannot dismantle the master's house." I think she means that change cannot come from those in power, but must come in collaboration with the queers, the migrants, the yellow, Black, and brown, and indigenous people of color, because this country was not built with our needs in mind. The similarity between art and migration is the fearless and radical imagination that drives them. For me, to be a political artist is ceaselessly entwined with continuing the imagination that my ancestors once started. When the narrative of migration and art combines, a movement can be born, a living community that breathes, soars, and imagines together until we are all free. So what could a narrative like this look like? The last poem I'm about to share with you is one small example. It is what I dream. But dear migrants, your story began long before this poem did and continues long after this poem ends. This world needs to hear from you. So what story will you tell? We are at the border again. Here is a canvas so white, it is ready for paint. An ocean so stormy, it is ready for sailing. A fence so solid, it is ready for crossing. So go ahead and jump. Watch our shoulders spread into sails that will never face the direction of home again. The Border Patrol will ask us, go back to where you came from. But where we came from is the mouth of a gun that our family soared out from just in time. Where we came from is the factory where we work the graveyard shift so your America may witness the comfort of another morning. Where we came from is the forest that men we never met clear-cut into their own feeding ground, leaving no scraps left for our children. We are starving. Hunger drives the body into imagination. Imagination is daring to love what is not in front of us, the second chance that we reach for when they cut off our hands, the shelter that we hammer around our children long before we can afford the floorboards, the reincarnation of our family when our homeland is reduced to ash. So what then is immigration, if not imagination given a destination, a magic so powerful that it must be banned? For migrants, dreaming is a crime that they are beating out of us. What the journey cannot kill, they destroy with their hands as they chop off our wings and carpet the empire with our feathers. But even bones separated from limb do not forget the rhythm of their own flapping. Migrants are warriors. We risk everything to liberate ourselves a future that your America is not yet ready for, long before the wilderness was ever fenced. We have been crossing borders. Every journey that we make is a choice to rather die soaring in the direction of dreams than die in the mouth of a gun. But if we die, with our toes but a tripwire away from America, then look at us reborn into the sky, a stardust country bound by no borders. Look up and witness the warrior sun that no one's prison cell can ever extinguish. Our body is here to prove to you migration is magic. Of course they are afraid of all who possess it, when it will return to us, the world. Thank you.